So as people continue to join, I just welcome you in. The last session, if you were there for that, before we went to break, was so rich and full, as the last day has been as well. And we wanted to open our session with that, to hear your voices or to use the chat box. What's been an aha or an insight or even just a reflection of the nature prompt of the land legacy sessions, or anything from yesterday? What's been calling to you? And we'll just give you a minute. You are welcome to unmute yourself and speak into that, or use the chat. Thanks, Naomi. Land has intrinsic value to be discovered. The land has an important role in the healing of the whole. Okay, to revive the mission to create an NFP foundation to hold the retreat center after we move on. It's still possible, feeling full and grateful. Barbara, I love this comment. I want to visit everyone else's retreat center, and we hope that's possible. And it, one of the hopes for this retreat of retreat center leaders was to start those connections and build community and collaboration. So we're hopeful. Thanks, Chris, for populating the chat. You all are welcome to do that. I think we have so many loose threads, which is a wonderful problem to have, of where these conversations go now. And hopefully we'll weave them into this session for Metaphormation. It's a beautiful, before I hand it off to one of my co-facilitators, Michael, I want to share with you how we came to this conversation. I think it's really important to kind of see the workings behind. And we had first talked about transformation. What does that mean for retreat centers right now? And what does that mean for retreat center leaders, those who hold space for retreat centers? And Jenyng, Michael, and I, as co-facilitators of this space, immediately talked about the loss and opportunity, holding both when we talk about transformation, especially in the last year. And we wanted to speak to the realness of the grief and the loss and the trauma that has happened in the last year, that has happened for a long time. And then also, without being too toxic about positivity, hold on to the light. What else is working for us? And we decided one of the best ways to do that was through metaphors. And I think as you who are in this space will understand that, that sometimes those work when we don't have words, and when our experiences are dynamic, and when we want to express emotion, add description, and engage. And we had this beautiful plan, and then we said, that doesn't sit right with us. What else? And so we came up with another beautiful plan. Like, how else can we respond and create and craft this? And really, today's session, so we're recording this, and it will be up to your level of engagement. That's the invitation, is really spacious. So we're going to set you up. We're going to set some time for creativity to flow through you, and then to engage in conversation about that. What does transformation mean for you? We are all knowers and learners in this space. So we're really looking forward to the rich conversation that happens around metaphors. And with that, I'll hand it over to Michael.
Thanks so much, Justine. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm tuning in from the traditional land of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee people in Southern Ontario. And we're finally having beautiful weather up here in Canada, and we're just so thrilled. And so it's great to be with you. And as Justine noted, as we began to unpack transformation, we really started to play with a lot of metaphors and throwing that around. And one of the metaphors we came up with was the metaphor of compost. There's a science behind making good compost, and compost happens in a lot of different ways. Maybe it's in your backyard. You take your table scraps out and you throw them in a bin and you turn it over and you get out some beautiful, fresh compost to put on your gardens, vegetable or flowers. Or maybe you're part of a larger municipality compost programming where it's collected up and then it's, institutionally made and then shared with you later back to your garden. And, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into composting. I'll also say that we played with a few other metaphors, butterfly chrysalis. We talked about like a lemonade stand, or what else could we make out of lemons? So we played with a lot of different metaphors to really think about transformation. And just to reiterate that this time is going to be a time for you to just jump into the sandbox. Another metaphor, my son loves the sandbox, and every time he goes into the sandbox, something cool and creative comes out of it. It's not the same ever. Something new is generated from his time in the sandbox. So we hope you have your tools with you that you're going to need, art supplies, or if you're a writer, pen and paper, anything you need to just play. We're going to play. So this is, we're going to tune into our childlike time, and we're going to play with our transformation experience. And each of us are going to just share a few minutes here about a little bit about the composting experience we've been through in our own retreat center life and leadership. And at Five Oaks, you know, I've loved playing for the last few weeks with this idea of compost, because, you know, in our pile of stuff that we want to biodegrade from this experience of COVID, a pandemic time, of, you know, being shut down or rushing to do something new, or gearing up to go online, or laying off staff or rehiring staff, you know, reconfiguring spaces, you know, dining and all that, all the stuff. There's been so much stuff, upheaval and change. There's also been beauty. You know, we've had a chance to just relax. We've had a chance to stop the busyness. We've had a chance to breathe and reimagine programs and space. So all of these are examples, at least at Five Oaks, that we've experienced during this time. And I've been imagining all of these different experiences heaped onto this compost pile. So, you know, to do good composting, you have to have a lot of good ingredients. You need organic matter, you need water, you need oxygen, you need that microbial process, you need the insects in there, and you know, you need to stir it. You need a good pitchfork to flip it over, or maybe you have one of those fancy composters where you turn it and it just does it automatically for you. You need compost. So you need the stuff that you want to change. So you need water, heat, and you need carbon. So I've been imagining what all these different elements are. So for instance, during the pandemic, we had a chance to reimagine how our program team was going to be structured. And it gave us a chance to, because some people had been laid off, to reimagine the structure of that and to then hire a new program team. So I can put that onto my organic pile. We've had to reconfigure how bedrooms are going to be laid out. You know, can we have 2 people in a room? Can we have 1 person in a room? Well, that's a really tough one. So like, that's a whole, I've heaped that onto my pile. I've had to imagine, like, who's the pitchfork? And where is this pile going to be? Where is it going to be most productive as a pile of compost? And then I've been imagining, you know, in a year from now, after I've let this compost, I've cared for it, what am I going to use it for? You know, like, what is it going to be? So at Five Oaks, we had a chance during the pandemic actually to host migrant workers who are arriving to Canada and doing their 14-day isolation care. So as we've been bringing people together, we've had to figure out how to keep them apart safely. You know, I'm throwing that onto my compost pile, knowing that when in a new normal, how will I harness that experience, this richness that we've experienced? And what newness will come from having welcomed, you know, migrant workers to Canada? So I've just been playing with it. I've drawn this big pile of stuff, and I've been like heaping onto it all this stuff that I can decompose and make into something new and beautiful. So we're going to all have a chance to do that. But Jenyng is going to tell you a little bit about how they have been playing with the compost pile and their own metaphorical approach to it. So Jenyng.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm going to introduce the emergent here and unfolding. I will play with the butterfly metaphor. Because when we were talking about the compost, I realized I didn't resonate with it. Probably because my own depth of understanding of compost, I know enough to be dangerous in a conversation, but not to where I can connect it to my lived reality. And what's simplest for me was this, and I've learned it's a chrysalis. Chrysalis, is that the word? Chrysalis. So there's the caterpillar, there's the chrysalis, and then there's the butterfly. And the reason I love that metaphor is earlier this year, I had my own transformational thinking about transformation. Pre-thought was transformation is this idea of becoming better, of something to become that solves a problem or that didn't serve. And the thought that then sat with me was transformation is the natural evolution of the journey. It's not something I create. It's not something that I, like a superhero, you know, Clark Kent goes from the glasses reporter into this, you know, Superman. And what I love about the butterfly, that biology, is that in the caterpillar, in its state of the caterpillar, the butterfly is already in its DNA. What it's going to become is already in its DNA. The chrysalis, I apologize. I've always grown up calling it a cocoon, so I'm really trying hard not to call it a cocoon and giving it its rightful name. But the chrysalis process is the actual transformation piece that happens. And then the coming out of that and becoming that butterfly. What's interesting for me is that in that butterfly, it's still a caterpillar. Caterpillar hasn't died. So in those three, you know, processes, all of them exist at one time or another, but our visual seeing of it is one of the three that are existing. And what I sat with in my metaphor was in, as Justine had alluded earlier, this idea of loss and grief and being able to process that. And so the chrysalis was, there's a story of the Good Samaritan that walked through the garden and saw, just happened to be there when the butterfly was coming out of its chrysalis shell. And in its good heart, saw the struggle and said, I want to help. And then thus open the chrysalis to help the butterfly. But then what happened was the butterfly couldn't fly, because it's through the struggle of coming out of the chrysalis that the butterfly is strengthening its wings. And in that struggle and the building of those new muscles, that then it can go flutter away. And so when I think about OAEC, some of our chrysalis, what happened was we were, you know, and we're in California, so it was like a complete shutdown mid-March. And then in April, our barn burned down. And there was this grief and anger. And this barn is like 40 some years old. We're only 27 years old. So there's a continual legacy and relationship with land and people throughout the Occidental Arts and Ecology's history. And so this, and then the barn was also a place where we gathered. It was our tool shop, but then at night it became this, you know, place to gather and parties. And suddenly this sense of like, not only did COVID take away our ability to physically just get together, but suddenly with this barn burning down, the physical and symbolic representation of us to gather was also gone. And like everyone else, we went through the PPP, we went through staffing and financial scenarios and shrinking down and the difficulties of saying, you know, you got to go down in hours, and that affecting people's livelihoods. and now, and then doing the PPP loans, and then finding out that ERC, the employee retention credit in the United States. So come to today, we're just in the middle of our 2021 staff and budget planning. And we realized through the PPP and the barn burning down with the insurance and the donations coming in for that and this ERC credit, we got a $500,000 shortfall, and we're like, wow, we should like be in crisis more. We actually financially do better in crisis. But we're coming out of that, you know, through that chrysalis experience, and now trying to figure out like, how do we, what does our butterfly look like, right? What's the colors on our wings? How big is our wingspan? And so it's helpful with metaphors to think through the complexities of our ecosystem and the man-made constructs and structures and systems that we create. So for me, it helps me tether back down, you know, to earth. And so that's what I wanted to share, was just in order to tell the OAEC history, a lot of times going into simple, and especially as an ecology center, you know, I can riff about, you know, the swales and the water flows and all that stuff, and have that be a parallel way to speak what's happening in the virtual, etheric, spiritual space of ecosystems. So we both, you know, we can navigate our ecosystems and then help navigate our ecosystems by translating it through our ecosystem language. And with that, I will pass it to Justine.
Oh, Jenyng, that was wonderful. And Michael, thank you. Both of those visuals are beautiful. So this is really interesting. As many of you know who have been with us yesterday, that I support the Retreat Center collaboration. And if I've shared with you, I also am the Associate Director at Kirkridge Retreat and Study Center in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania. So I love that I get to walk in these dual roles. And I was really stuck by metaphors as we were free thinking as a small group. I thought, oh, I can talk about lemons to lemonade, right? Like that sour, what was the bitter, and adding sugar into this beautiful product. Could talk about coal to diamonds, even though diamonds don't come from coals. It's a commonly used idiom. Transformers, you know, like there are so many metaphors to respond to transformation. And then I was like, I love kimchi. Let's talk about fermentation and mushrooms in mycelium networks. Just prompting this to be creative. And I landed on something that I think is here in the retreat, and something that is so deeply rooted at Kirkridge, even before I came, of course, is threads. What are the woven threads? So a thread is strong unto itself, right? A ribbon is strong in individual strings. And what happens when we weave that together into a stronger blanket or rug or clothing or any of the things it could be in its final product? I thought that was a beautiful metaphor for Kirkridge communities. Pre-COVID, we have such strong supporters and lovers and donators, and they had shown up to Kirkridge on the land for their one retreat a year, and they came back for decades, always. And COVID-19 shattered that for us, for a retreat center who loves their land so much. But what happened was these threads started to weave together online, not only just staying in their silos or by themselves, but really coming to the community of Kirkridge and weaving together and sharing. And now that that connection's been made, we are stronger together. And that's really become our tagline at Kirkridge. We are stronger together. We are Kirkridge. We are this practice, place, and people. And I don't know if we would have gotten there without the unexpected outcomes of COVID, really breaking down those silos and breaking down barriers so people can access Kirkridge from home and rely on each other and build this beautiful weaving of communities, of lived experiences, of stories. And I think that just sits so well in as we weave together the retreat centers today and yesterday too. We all have these individual stories, but when we share together, we are stronger together. And I'm just so grateful that Michael and Jenyng have also shared their personal stories. And I'm hopeful for today that we'll start weaving our stories together too. Jenyng, do you want to pop back over?
Yes, thank you. So we're going to expand the space now to hold all of us together. And with your paper, pen, or just your imagination, clay, dirt, however you play, whatever the materials that you have for your sandbox, we're going to just for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to play warm sweater music. It's off of my Spotify list because it's cold in my house. And so that playlist somehow makes me feel warm. And it's a lovely, soothing, just background music. But as you take some time to think about your center and what metaphor comes to you and how you would describe it to a 6-year-old child. And then as you draw, whether it's in your mind or on paper, what are the elements of your metaphor, and then how do they translate into the realities of your center? And just open that space up. Both, did somebody say something? Okay, open that space up to be intentional about your own thoughts, but also be allow the unfolding or unconscious of insights to come through. And then when we're done with that, we're going to break out into small groups and share our metaphors and stories with each other.
And then I hope you had a great time sharing that with friends sitting on the edge of the sandbox. And now's the time to kind of like dust off the sand from your pants and get ready to move out of the sandbox into a new phase of the day. And we're going to have about 10 minutes for folks to just share out any insights that were gained in the small groups or individually, any ahas or connection points. And you'll be able to do that shouting out into this group, or you can type it into the chat box. And I just invite you, if you feel comfortable before we do that, just if you did create something, I invite you just a quick show and tell. You can just hold up into the screen here for all of our friends in the circle to see our creativity on display. And if you didn't create anything physical, you can just put a big smile on your face, and we'll just look at all the beauty that has been created and shared. Amazing. And I'll say one of the big ahas for me that I hadn't thought about was this word time. All the metaphors that we kind of used take time to happen. It takes time for that chrysalis to form and a butterfly to emerge. Composting, it takes time. We don't have to rush these things, you know, in our tendency, in our human way, to take time for the transformation to happen. And that's okay for it to take time. So I open the circle for any sharing that folks might have.
Oh, you said I can talk? You asked for it.
You can talk or you can type.
No, I realized when I was doing this art, which I haven't done any of for a really long time, that I've been ignoring my playfulness. When the whole, I didn't go off our property for almost a year, starting March 11th was the last time I was at a Toastmasters meeting. I think I got pretty grim and just, you know, forgot that I could express myself with art, and I could play, and I could find the fun. I mean, I'm pretty good at finding the silver linings or the golden threads. We did not suffer financially as much as a bigger place would, but we need to get people to laugh. We really do, because laughter heals.
Thanks, Sheila, for reminding us to be playful and to laugh. I see Kirsten, she listened to music and danced, and to check out Secret Base, and there's a link there. And Jenyng is encouraging some laughing clubs on the text box there. Any other share outs? Sue, you're muted.
When I first sat still, it was like I had that invitation to just do that, to just sit still. And to allow, to let it be still, receive those words kept just coming to me. And it reminded me of a story of, I have my native flute here, especially since prayer this morning or the opening session with Arlene, when she said, let's listen to some music. I grabbed mine. And what happened was, when I was learning to play this, something wasn't going through right. The air was blocked. So I took it to my neighbor, and who had a whole slew of flutes and knew what to do with them. And so he took it apart and redid the reed here and all the different pieces of it. And then he said, for good measure, he stuck a pipe cleaner up it, the first chamber. So here's the first chamber, and then there's this little chamber. And right here between the chambers, he hit a little spider's nest, and all the baby spiders came flying out. And that metaphor came back to me during this, because unless I can empty out my egoic self, that part of me that clamors for attention, or that is all worried, or that is trying to control everything. If I can't set that down, then how can spirit play its song through me, and its song through us? And so that was a big invitation for me in this process, is to lay it down, lay everything down, and let it be done. As a Christian center, there's the story of the maiden who said to the angel, let it be done, and received the divine indwelling so that she could birth it to the world. And I think that's our invitation. So my invitation, it might be all of our invitation, to don't try so hard, let it be done.
Thank you, Sue. Any other folks wanting to share? And there is no pressure to do so. In this beautiful silence, I think it's okay to transition then into our closing, Jenyng and Justine. And thank you, everybody, for playing together, for laughing together, for sharing deeply in your small groups. Let's continue.
I can tell my story. Like, some people left, I'm like, oh man, they're gonna miss this, but luckily, Ben, you're recording it. In the spirit of playfulness, in the spirit of tying things together. Sorry, I'm trying to take my rings off my fingers. And to composting is a process of a life cycle. There is no beginning and end. Death is part of it. Birth is part of it. Peak is part of it. And so I want to bring in back Justine's threads, and how we share. We realize that we are part of a fabric of many, many threads. And so in my clothes, I actually have string. And so I'm going to tell a little story. Once upon a time, our centers grew out of intention and heart, with a lot of vision and a mission to what we want to serve in the world. And we thought about, okay, what are the things that we need in this. And in the threads of life, we think, okay, well, we need structure and we need people and staffing. What are we going to do with our place? How are we going to do it? We think of all the activities we're going to do and all the people we're going to serve. And we build layers of systems and structures. And then COVID happened, and there's all this sort of tied upness. And the opportunity for us is to figure out, how do we come back to our essence? How do we become the foundation for which then we can hold all the things in a way that may be different, but also the same? So we're all threads in the fabric of what we call humanity. So deeply honored and grateful to be sharing space. And as I like to say lots of times, y'all beautiful humans. And I'll pass that to Justine.
Jenyng, thank you so much for weaving that in and reminding us of essence. And thank you all for being with us and engaging and truly being open to what retreat with retreat center directors and leaders and lovers looks like.